Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our PointCentral Administration website series. First, we'll get started with our housekeeping and legal disclaimer. I'll leave this up for a minute and let you read through it. Next, if you have any questions related to this webinar, you can use the chat feature in the GoToWebinar, and one of the consultants we have on the call with us will answer you. Any other questions can be answered with our dedicated customer service at calixdcs@calixsoftware.com. I'll be your presenter today. My name is Derek Young. I'm a professional consultant and trainer at Calix. On today's agenda, we'll be covering business rules and the 4 different types of business rules we have within the PointCentral admin website. Those would consist of the state licensing rules, required field rules, disabled field rules, and custom field rules. But first, let's talk about the purpose of using business rules. Business rules are an excellent tool for enhancing the efficiency and compliance of your business operations. They enable you to enforce mandatory fields that are often overlooked by your loan originators or processors. Additionally, you can utilize these rules to advance a file status within your loan processing workflow. If there are specific fields you prefer to keep uneditable during the process, you can easily disable them, which will gray them out for your users. Furthermore, business rules allow you to present reminder messages to your users. You can also tailor rules for specific users or user groups, making business rules highly customizable. There are 4 rules you can create in your PointCentral admin website that we're going to go over today. The first one being the state license rule. We have a required field rule, a disabled field rule, and a custom message rule. For the state license rule, this enables you to choose the states where you, as a company or individual, are authorized to operate. This ensures that users cannot initiate a loan in a state where they lack a license, thereby supporting your compliance efforts. If a user enters a state where they are not licensed, they will be unable to save or print any documents, and I will guide you through that process of setting this up. The required field rule enables the admin to select a specific field within Point that must be filled out before a user can save or print. When this rule is activated, a dialog box will pop up in the top right corner, informing the user which field needs to be completed to proceed with the loan process. It's advisable to choose fields that are commonly used by your users for this rule. Keep in mind that the pop-up will not provide guidance in how to access the required field or direct them to it. The disabled field rule functions in contrast to the required field rule. It prevents the user from editing the field, effectively turning it into a read-only field for them. A custom message rule enables the administrator to set up notifications for users when specific business rules are activated. This feature can guide users to the relevant fields within Point or serve as a helpful reminder for them to update a status or complete another field. Within the custom messages, there are 2 types, hard stops and soft stops. A hard stop prevents users from saving their work until they meet the required conditions. For instance, if a field is mandatory, users must fill it out before proceeding with a loan process. On the other hand, soft stops act as a reminder or warnings, prompting users to pay attention to certain fields or follow specific steps without hindering their ability to save or print the document. This allows administrators to create helpful messages that encourage users to complete necessary actions without imposing strict limitations. Let's go ahead and open up our PointCentral website, and I can walk you through each of these rule types. So currently, I'm inside of my PointCentral admin website, so we can walk through each of these rule types. We'll head over to the navigation panel and select the option for rules. We have add rules, which will allow you to create a rule, and we have list rules. I'm going to go ahead and click on add rule. First, we will start with the first rule that we covered, which was the state license rule. So I'm going to call this one state license as our example. And then I'm going to click the add rule button. This is going to open up your rule, allowing you to create this one. Underneath the name at the top, you have the description area. This is not a required area, but you can add in what you're trying to accomplish with this rule. So if somebody later on comes in and is the admin for the system, they will know what you're trying to accomplish with the rule. Below that is the rule type with the drop down. In here, you can see the 4 types of rules that we covered, and you can select the rule type here. I'm going to select the state license, and you can see below all of the states have come up with the checkboxes here in this section. Now, the purpose of the state license rule, again, was to allow a user to only originate loans in the state that they are licensed to work in. So inside of here, you would go through and check the checkboxes for the states that your users are licensed to work in. I'll go ahead and click the checkbox for Texas, and then you can save that. There are also two buttons down at the bottom of the screen for Select All and Unselect All. So if there are licensed in all states or most states, rather than having to check all of the checkboxes, you could go and select all and then deselect the states you did not need. That just makes the process a little bit more efficient. However, I'm just going to leave it on Texas as our example. When you've built out your rule, you want to scroll down to the very bottom of this screen. There are two buttons down here. The Update Rule, this is your save button. You do want to be sure that you click that anytime you make any changes inside of your rule. So let's go ahead and click that one. It is going to take you back to the top of the screen, and you can now see at the very top, Point lets you know in red the rule information has been updated. So now you know that your rule has been saved. Let's scroll back down to the bottom, and the other button that we have down here is the Edit User Access. So right now we have built out a rule that only allows the originator to originate loans in Texas. This rule is currently not assigned to anyone. So this rule will not be triggered on anyone's system. We have to add the users that we want this rule to appear in their system. So that's what the Edit User Access button is for. So if we click this, you have two ways to add access rights to this rule. The top section is for adding user groups. This is probably the most common and easiest way to add users to a rule. You can select which group you want this rule to apply to, and then everyone inside the group will then have the same rule applied to them. The bottom section is individual users. So for example, if you have a user who is licensed in more or less states than the user group, this is the section you would grant them individual access rights to the rule. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to add the groups. So I'm going to click on Add Group Access Rights. This is going to bring up all of the user groups that you have inside of PointCentral. So you would select the group that you would like to have on your rule. You can have more than one, but you cannot add more than one group at a time on the list. So you're going to select the radio button for the group that you would like to add, and then click Add Group Access Rights. That group will then disappear from your list, and then you can continue adding the appropriate user groups to the rule. So I will go ahead and add the LO user group to this rule. Click Add Group Access Rights again, and those two groups have now been added to the state license rule. Let's move on to the second type of rule, which is the required field rule. So back in our navigation panel, we'll select Rules, Add Rule, and we're going to work on a required field. When I'm naming the rules up at the top, I like to put in what type of rule it is. If it's required, I will start the name off with required. If it was a disabled field rule, I will start with disabled, and then a small description of what I'm requiring or disabling. For this example, we're going to have the LO's name required. So I'm going to name this rule required LO. This will help you later when you have a list of all of your rules and you need to figure out which one you either need to edit or disable. This is an easy way for you to be able to tell what the rule does. So let me click the Add Rule here. That's going to create our rule. And we're going to go to that rule type drop down. In this drop down, we're going to click Required Fields. Below that, in the definition section, we're going to have a required field area. This has a drop down so you can look and see what types of items for fields you would like to require in your rule. You can start typing and that will bring up some options for you, or if you just know what the field ID number from inside a point, you can type that as well and it will bring that field up for you. I'm going to start typing in loan originator because that is what I would like to require in my loan. And as you can see, it brings that field up to the top of my list to select. So I'm going to select that from my list here. And going over to the left of that, you can see a green plus button. You will need to click that for it to become a required field. Currently, it's just sitting in the drop-down list. So I've got the loan originator field being required since it is now inside of that box. And you can add as many items as you would like inside of that box for your rule. and all of those fields will be required. Unlike the state license rule, the required, disabled, and custom message rules have an additional section. So if I scroll down just a little bit, we will see the condition section. The condition section is when you want the rule to be triggered. If you leave this condition section blank, it's going to trigger this rule on any file immediately. So we're going to leave this as is with no conditions. And what we're saying here is that there are no conditions, meaning we would like the rule to be triggered all the time. This rule, when a user opens up a file, will require them to put in their loan originator before they are able to save this file. We have nothing down here currently in our conditions, so what that would do to a file is that will require your field all the time. In this rule, a user would open up their loan, and immediately before they could save, they would be required to enter in their loan originator. I will build out some conditions after we finish this rule. So let's scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to click on the Update Rule button to save our rule. So now we have saved our rule, and then we'll scroll back down to the bottom and click the Edit User Access button. This screen again is for who we are adding to the rule. So I recommend when you're inside of your required, disabled, or custom message rules, that when you create them, you test them on yourself first. And that's to make sure that the rule is doing what you expect the rule to do. Then you can come back and switch it over to the users you want it to trigger for. For this example, I'm going to click on the Add Individual Access Rights button and apply this rule only to myself so we can test it. So I will select my name at the top and then click the Add User Access button. So this rule is currently only on my system. So what you're going to do is go back into Point, log out, and log back in for any of the changes you've made inside of PointCentral to take effect. And then we can test this rule. So let's jump into Point and we can test this rule. Inside the loan file, you can see in the lower section the originator that is red. That is a required field in order to save this file. So that tells you right off bat that you do have to fill that in. So if you go up to the top and click File, Save, and I haven't filled that in, it is going to display inside the field notification pop-up box that the loan originator cannot be blank. So we will have to fill that in before we're able to save this file. So let's jump back over to our PointCentral admin site. So we've tested the rule in our point system and we saw that the rule has worked. So now I'm going to go back into that same rule, and this time we're going to work on the condition section. The condition is when you want the rule to be triggered. So in our first example, we left this section blank, and that will make the rule fire off at the very beginning when you're opening your file. You can't save it without putting in that required field. If we want the loan originator to be required at a later point and not just when they open the loan file, this is when you can add the conditions. The conditions are the field as well. So let's say we want to require the loan originator to be filled in after the loan originator has put in the borrower's first and last name. So our condition part is when the LO has entered the borrower's first and last name. So let's hit the Add Conditions button, and it adds this bottom field. This has the same drop down as the required field rule, so you can see the fields you can use here. Again, you can also start typing in here, and that will populate the field for you. So if we start typing the word borrower, as you can see, it pulls up the field ID for the borrower's first name. So I'll select the borrower's first name. The section right below that is where it can be a little tricky. So you have some options in this drop down that will help you narrow down the condition even further. So with this one, we're saying when the borrower's first name is filled in, this is when we want the condition to be triggered. So this drop down gives you the ability to tell the rule what you want it to look for in the borrower's first name. The most frequently used options would be is blank or is not blank. The is blank option refers to nothing being entered into the field inside a point. The is not blank option means that someone entered data in that field inside a point. So in the rule that we're creating, we want when the LO has filled in the borrower's first name. So that means that the borrower's first name would not be blank because the LO has filled in the name in that field. So for this example, I'm going to select the is not blank in the drop down. And that completes the first condition. You can also add other conditions. So if we wanted to require the borrower's last name, you would follow the same process. You would add your condition, come to the drop down and start typing borrower, and that will bring up that list. And this time I'm going to select borrower's last name. And I also want when they have filled in the borrower's last name to be a condition for the rule to fire. So that can be the trickiest part, filling out these drop downs here of when you would like the rules to be triggered. After you've added more than one condition, you're going to see in the middle of the screen above that condition gray bar an extra drop down that wasn't there before. It says this rule runs for prospect and borrower and will apply when all or one conditions are met. So as you can see in the drop down, you are able to select all or one. The majority of the time, you're going to want all selected in this drop down. This means you want all of the conditions you put below to be true, and then the rule above the required field will fire. Once you've built out your rule, the easiest way to see if you've built out what you're looking to require is to read it from bottom to top. So you're going to start with those conditions and you'll read up to what is being required. So let me read this rule for you. We have when the borrower's last name is not blank and the borrower's first name is not blank, then the required field of loan originator will be required in the file. So it is helpful after you build out your rule to read it from the bottom up to see if you got what you are expecting the rule to do. So let's go into Point and test this rule and make sure it's firing off the way we expect. First, let's scroll down to the bottom and we're going to update our rule. Again, that's our save button. And then we'll scroll back down and click the edit user access button. So again, my name is in this one because this is the rule we were in earlier and we just want to make some modifications to the rule. Again, I like to have it where you test it on yourself first before putting it on other systems, just to be sure you have what you expect to happen in your file. So now we're going to go back into our Point system. Keep in mind that you are going to need to log out a Point and log back in for the changes to take effect. And then we can test the rule out on a new file. So I'm going to hop back over to Point and click on New Loan, and we can test our rule that we just set up. We said that if the LO entered the first and last name of the borrower and then went to save it, it would require the loan originator's name. So let's test that. And you can see right here, the message in the top right, the loan originator field cannot be blank. And it has highlighted that red field for them as well. You can see that our test has worked. You can see the borrower's first and last name has been filled in and our rule has fired. Let's go back over into our PointCentral website and let's go ahead and create a disable field rule. Back inside our PointCentral here, let's go ahead back inside of our rules and create a disable rule for us now. I'm going to click on rules, add rule, and again, we're going to name this. So I'm going to say disabled. And in this example, I'm going to say that after the lock desk has locked a rate for us, we're going to disable the note rate. So I'm going to type in note rate as well for our example and click add rule. So again, the same format at the beginning. We need to select the rule type from the drop down, and this time we're going to select disabled fields. It looks identical to the required fields layout, so in your disabled fields, you're going to do the exact same thing as you did with the required fields layout. So you're going to select the fields that you want to be disabled, and in this one, I want the note rate to be disabled. So I can start typing that in, or again, if I have the field ID number, I can type that in as well. So I'm going to select the note rate from the list here and click the green plus sign, and that's going to add it to my disabled area. Now let's scroll down to our conditions area. So conditions again are when you want the rule to be triggered. So right now with no conditions, that note rate field would be grayed out for your users and they would not be able to enter in the note rate in that field. So we want to tell the rule when we want it to be triggered. So in my example, we want it to fire after the lock desk has put in that the loan is locked. We can do that off of the fees worksheet that has a locked area, or we can do that off of the expiration date. I'm going to go off the number of days left locked in to trigger our rule. So I'm going to add a condition here. This time I'm going to search by field ID, and for the rate lock period, I happen to know that the field ID is 6062. So I'm going to plug that field ID in the drop down, and you can see the lock term pulls up, so I will select that. And then we've got this drop down again, and we have other options in this drop down, but I'm going to use the is not blank option. So that means that the lock desk or someone has filled in the lock period with a number of days, It is not blank inside of our file, and our note rate is disabled. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and click the update rule. That's our save button. And then scroll back down and edit user access. And I'm going to add myself again to this rule for testing. Then we're going to go back inside of Point after we've logged out and back in so we can see the new rule that we just created. So inside of Point, I'm going to click on a new loan so we can test this rule. This rule, we went off of the fees worksheet. So we said if someone has filled in the number of locked days, that it would then gray out our note rate. So let's go ahead and put in a 30-day lock here and click save. You can see right above that, a couple fields up, the interest rate is now grayed out. So this will not allow a user to change that field. All right, now let's go back into PointCentral and create our final rule type, which is the custom message rule. All right, so we're going back to our rules and add rule. This is going to be our last rule, the custom message. And the custom message that I'll select from the drop down here is a little different from the required or the disabled, in that it gives the ability to actually type in a message that will pop up for the user. This is a great way when you need to direct your users to where to go inside a Point, or you just want to use it as a reminder, just to show them that they need to look at a certain screen before they continue on with the process. For our example, I'm going to remind them to fill in the mortgage insurance rate if their loan is a conventional that is above 80% LTV. So I'll show you the two ways you can set it up as a hard stop or as a reminder. So inside of your message box, you can type anything you would like. I'm going to pretend that my users don't know where the mortgage insurance button is. So I'm going to use this message box to direct them to that. So I'm going to type in here, please enter MI rate. And then I'm going to tell them where the screen is. So I'm going to put that in borrower information screen at bottom MI tab. So I've told them that they need to go enter the MI rate and where to locate that tab inside of Point. You can see above what we just entered, a yellow triangle. This is a warning. So currently right now, the rule that we are creating would just pop up with the warning telling them to go enter their mortgage insurance rate, but it wouldn't stop the user from saving their file or from printing anything. So this is the soft stop that we have within the custom messages. If you do want to change it to a hard stop, meaning they have to fix whatever you have in your rule, then you would click the checkbox right above that that says do not continue without all conditions. Once you click the checkbox, it makes the icon below turn into a red exclamation mark, and now they will have to fix whatever you have put in your conditions. Now I'm going to scroll down and work on the conditions. Unlike the required fields that we had up at the top, everything is now going to be down in the conditions area. So the first condition I want to plug in is the mortgage insurance rate. So we want to know if that the mortgage insurance rate is not filled in, then we want them to fill it in. So we're going to go ahead and click on the add condition, and I will type in mortgage and see if our mortgage insurance rate comes up. And there we go. The mortgage insurance rate first renewal right here. So again, we have the option of our drop down. In this condition down here, we're going to say in the mortgage insurance rate, if they haven't filled it in. So if they haven't filled that part in, it's going to be blank. So we want to see if the insurance is blank, then our rule will fire. So let's keep building on this. We also want it to be for a conventional loan. So I'm going to add another condition, and we're going to type in conventional loan, and let's see if that pulls up. And it does. We have loan type conventional here for us, so we can select that one. And this time in our drop down, we're going to pick the option for is not blank. So that means that they have selected conventional as the loan type. And let's add one last condition here. We want the LTV to be above 80%, and that would then require them to put in the mortgage insurance. So let's type in LTV, and it does pull up for us, and I'll select that. And this time in the drop down, we don't want to select if it is blank or not blank. We need it to be a number. So I'm going to choose the option for greater than, because we want it to be larger than 80%. Now you don't need to type in or put the percentage in the field because Point doesn't have a percentage inside the actual field. It's just referring to the actual number that's inside of the field inside of Point. So you don't need a $ or percentages or any of that. So this rule has the most conditions out of any we've built out today. So again, let's read this one from the bottom to the top to look at what we made happen with this rule. So starting from the bottom, if our LTV is greater than 80% and the loan is a conventional and the mortgage insurance rate is blank, so they haven't filled that in, then we're going to have this message pop up that says, please enter MI rate, and telling them where to go. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom again and click the update rule to save. Then I'm going to scroll back down and put ourselves on this rule so we can test it. And then we can log back into Point and test this on a new file. All right, so I'm back inside of Point and I'm going to start a brand new loan. Inside of this rule that we made, we said that if a loan was a conventional, and we've got the checkbox in the conventional checkbox, and now we need to enter the LTV being above 80%. So let me go add in a loan amount for us. And we have an LTV now. So let's go ahead and try to save this file and see if our rule fires. So you can see in the top right, we've got the custom message that we typed in that tells us please enter MI rate on the borrower information screen at the bottom inside of the MI tab. So we could close this and they would know exactly where to go, and they could enter their rate here. Click OK, and it should now allow them to save. And it does. We now have a file number because they have completed all of those items in the required conditions area. And once you have made sure that your rule does work, you can then go back into your PointCentral admin website and add the appropriate user groups to the newly created business rules. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact our dedicated customer service at calyxdcs@calyxsoftware.com.